Namaste and welcome to the first ever session of Wealth Ideas, an investor education initiative by PhonePe. Through this series, we want to help you make the right investment decision. और वो हम कैसे करेंगे? By sharing interesting investment concepts and addressing your questions about investing. My name is Terence Lucian. In today's session, we are going to talk about something which is on the minds of a lot of investors. और वो है कि इस markets में, in uncertain markets में, how should one invest in an uncertain market? In fact, as promised, we also have with us a guest speaker who's very well known in the investment industry. And he is also going to share with us his views on what investors should do when they are faced with the current market situation. As we mentioned in our invite, the guest speaker is Mr. Aashish Somaiyaa, right? Aashish Somaiyaa is the CEO of Whiteoak Capital Asset Management. Hi, welcome Aashish. So Aashish, okay, now let's start with today's topic. As you know, and we shared with you, we have a mix of new and existing investors, and everybody is thinking, it's been on the minds of a lot of people, and I'm sure you get this question every time you speak with a lot of investors. Yeah. What should somebody do in this existing market, right? The markets have been very volatile in the last few months. Kafi utar chada hota aa raha hai, right? In fact, the Nifty has what 17-18% down from its peak. So a lot of investors जिन्होंने कुछ last couple of years में who have started investing, उन्होंने ये volatility कभी देखा नहीं है, right? So my first question to you, Aashish, would be, can you help us understand why is this market so volatile? ये उतार चढ़ाव क्यों हो रहा है? Over to you.
So, Terence, the first thing is, what do we mean by volatility? On any given day or for a particular point in time, let's say you're just not able to get any direction from the market, right? So while if you see from January onwards, or let's say late last year onwards, there has been decline in the market, but it's not just like a one-way decline. There are many days when the market goes up 1 or 2% and then even falls 1 or 2%. So high volatility actually means that the market is kind of undecided and the market is, trying to digest many news. Because how is the ups and downs caused? The ups and downs are caused purely based on people buying and people selling, right? So on any given day, if index goes up 1 or 2%, or in any given day, if the index falls 1 or 2%, it basically in the short term means that more number of people are buying than they are selling, or more number of people are selling than they are buying. So that is basically high volatility is always a phase related to uncertainty. Now, one needs to think that what is the uncertainty all about? Like अभी का जो माहौल है, तो uncertainty किसकी वजह से है? तो जो भी लोग अखबार पढ़ते हैं, न्यूज़ फॉलो करते हैं, उन्होंने देखा होगा कि पिछले थोड़े कोविड के बाद से भारत की आर्थिक व्यवस्था को लेके, इंडिया की इकोनॉमी को लेके, इंडिया के कंपनीज के परफॉर्मेंस को लेके, द न्यूज़ इज गेटिंग बेटर एंड बेटर. लेकिन अनसर्टेनिटी किसकी वजह से है? जैसे यूएस के बारे में आप पढ़ते हैं, क्या यूएस में रिसेशन आएगा? वहां पे ब्याज दर क्यों बढ़ रहे हैं? यूक्रेन और रशिया में वॉर क्यों हो रहा है? तेल का दाम क्यों बढ़ रहा है? तो काफी सारी चीजें, देखिए, हाई वॉलेटिलिटी मींस देयर इज अनसर्टेनिटी. लेकिन किसी भी निवेशक को ये समझना चाहिए, एनी इन्वेस्टर शुड अंडरस्टैंड दैट वेयर इज द अनसर्टेनिटी एक्चुअली कमिंग फ्रॉम. As long as it is coming from imported problems, basic point is that as long as it is coming from imported problems, my past experience tells me you should not worry about it. Second thing, किसी बहुत ही smart, well-read आदमी ने कहा था कि all past corrections look like missed opportunities except the current one, right? So इसीलिए, there is one simple data point that I want to share with your permission. Can I just share this on the screen if you don't mind?
Please go ahead.
Yeah. So अगर आप मार्केट का तो चलन ही ऐसा है, देखिए, जैसा मैंने बोला कि इंपोर्टेड प्रॉब्लम्स जब होते हैं तो हमको रिएक्ट नहीं करना चाहिए, उसका फायदा लेना चाहिए. तो यहाँ पे आपको दिखेगा, सी दिस इज लास्ट 15 इयर्स ऑफ द मार्केट, करेक्ट? 2017 आप देखिए यहाँ पे कितनी बार मार्केट ऊंच नीच हुआ है, कितनी बार हमने अनसर्टेनिटी देखा है, राइट? आप देखिए 2008 में यूएस में एक फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस आया. 2011 में ऐसा महसूस होता था कि यूरोप के काफी सारे कंट्रीज हैं वो बैंकरप्ट हो जाएंगे. 2013 में भी यूएस में ब्याज दर बढ़ने की बात हो रही थी. 2016-17 में ट्रम्प साहब का इलेक्शन होने वाला था, 2018 में यूएस और चाइना का ट्रेड वॉर हुआ, हमारे यहाँ पे भी एक लिक्विडिटी क्राइसिस था, 2020 में कोविड, अब 2022 में हम फिर आके देख रहे हैं दैट यूएस इज गोइंग टू रेज रेट्स, इज देयर सम पैनिक। सो क्या है कि अनसर्टेनिटी होना और अनसर्टेनिटी की वजह से वॉलेटिलिटी होना, ये तो मार्केट का बेसिक चलन है, ये तो मार्केट का बेसिक बिहेवियर है। तो पिछले 15 साल में भी आप देखिए, सो मेनी फेजेस, अप्स एंड डाउन्स तो होते रहते हैं। द पॉइंट इज कि जब भी मैंने क्या बोला कि ऑल पास्ट करेक्शन लुक्स लाइक मिस्ड अपॉर्चुनिटीज एक्सेप्ट दिस वन। तो ये चार्ट से आपको समझ में आ जाएगा कि पिछले समय में जितनी भी बार बड़े करेक्शन आए हैं, तब अगर हम लोग चिंता करने के बजाय उसका फायदा उठाते तो अल्टीमेटली हमारा रिटर्न ज्यादा बनता। सो ये एक चीज ध्यान में रखनी चाहिए। दूसरी चीज ये ध्यान में रखनी चाहिए कि पास्ट में बहुत बार मार्केट में करेक्शन हुआ है, और करेक्शन जो है ऑन एन एवरेज 15-20 महीने, कभी 6 महीना, कभी 2 महीना, कभी 12 महीना, करेक्शन हैज बीन देयर फॉर वेरियस पॉइंट्स इन टाइम, and anywhere between 6 months to 12 months, 24 months, the market has recovered. But what is the meaning of recovery? आप राइट हैंड साइड का कॉलम देखिए 2000 से 2001 मार्केट गिरा, करेक्शन पीरियड 17 महीने चला, राइट? लेकिन उसके बाद आप देखिए रिकवर्ड बाय 2003 इन 27 मंथ्स, 17 महीने करेक्शन चला, टोटल 2 साल के अंदर अंदर मार्केट नए हाई पे आ गए, 113% रिटर्न। तो ऐसे यहाँ पे 7 से 8 एग्जाम्पल है कि जब भी मार्केट गिरा, देखिए कोविड में लगातार 2 महीने मार्केट गिरा, 2 महीने में 40% गिर गया, लेकिन विद इन द नेक्स्ट 7 मंथ्स मार्केट रीच्ड इट्स प्रीवियस हाई एंड एट द हाईएस्ट पॉइंट इट वाज 47% हायर देन द प्रीवियस वन। सो क्या है, ये 2 स्लाइड से हमारा बोलने का मतलब ये है कि मार्केट में करेक्शन होना ये तो लगा रहता है। वी हैव टू एक्चुअली एंश्योर कि हम करेक्शन का फायदा उठाएं। करेक्शन कभी 1 महीना, कभी 2 महीना, कभी 1 साल चलता है, और अल्टीमेटली साल 2 साल में बड़ी रिकवरी आती है। तो उसका फायदा कैसे लिया जाए, उस पर हमको फोकस करना चाहिए।
So that's quite interesting, Ashish. Thank you. I think वो जो आपने चार्ट जो आपने दिखाया है, that's very very interesting कि जब मार्केट करेक्शन हो रहा है और अगर हम मार्केट में उस टाइम है, तो there is a lot of uncertainty and a lot of people try and avoid such situations. But आपने जो कहा कि every past dip is actually an opportunity. That's very interesting. और जो चार्ट आपने दिखाया, that shows that when you actually look at it from a longer point of view, the dip really was an opportunity, which and we've seen that 2008 crisis and all the other points that you showed. So I think that's quite interesting. So I'll जो आपने बताया है कि in every hindsight, मतलब once you go past that timeline, तब ऐसे लगता है कि ये काफी अच्छा opportunity था. But what would you see? A lot of हमारे जो investors है, जो हमारे आज participants भी हैं यहाँ पे, a lot of them उन्होंने ये volatility पहली बार देखा, this is the first time they're seeing this, right? इसके पहले उन्होंने कभी देखा नहीं है, right? So how should they look at this situation? I understand that आप बोल रहे हैं once you pass it, it looks like it was an opportunity. But आज today, how should they handle such a situation? What would you share with them?
See, normally क्या होता है Terence, that everybody has, सबके अपने अपने goals होते हैं। जैसे किसी का चिल्ड्रंस एजुकेशन, किसी का हाउस परचेज, किसी का वेकेशन, किसी का कोई एसेट परचेज। तो क्या होता है कि हम लोग one thing we always underestimate, which is basically we underestimate our time horizon of investing. We feel that we need to access, जैसे कि मार्केट गिरता है ना, तो एक बच्चों जैसा जिद होता है इन्वेस्टर्स के अंदर कि just when the market is not doing well, they feel that, oh, I should have access to my money. Now my 10 rupees has become 9 rupees. If I remove now, I will get only 9 rupees. So all these kind of emotional reactions come whenever the market corrects. And actually, they don't need money. It's not like all of us need money tomorrow morning. So what if the market is down? Correct? But whenever the market is down, and that's when we start reacting emotionally, and that's where we feel that I need access to my money. So that is happening because most of us underestimate our time horizon for investing. और इसके लिए है ना, आप स्टॉक मार्केट को साइड पे रखिए, एक मैं आपको सिंपल फिक्स डिपॉजिट का भी एग्जांपल देता हूँ। टेक अ वाइल्ड गेस, जैसे आप यहाँ पे पोल कर रहे थे टेरेंस, लेट मी थ्रो इट बैक एट यू एंड मेक यू टेक अ गेस। अकॉर्डिंग टू यू, व्हेन पीपल प्लेस डिपॉजिट्स विद बैंक्स, which time horizon of bank deposit has maximum money in it? Like maximum money meaning more than half the money is in that time bucket only. According to you, कौन सा time bucket होना चाहिए? Is it 1 week, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years?
I think going by the way the banks show their fixed deposit rates, where the 12-month to 13-month rate is the highest, I would say maybe a year, 12 months to 13 months.
So you are absolutely right.
Wow.
Most of the people, see maximum, देखिए लोगों का पैसा बैंक में 3 साल 5 साल पड़ा रहता है, लेकिन most of the people they put it for 1 year and keep rolling it over. What does it mean? It means that they are overestimating the need for liquidity and underestimating the length of their horizon. क्योंकि 1 साल के बजाय अगर 3 साल 5 साल के लिए रखते हैं तो बहुत ज्यादा नहीं, लेकिन थोड़ा तो ज्यादा yield मिलता ना, right?
True.
लेकिन reinvestment risk लेके भी, because people want access to the money and they don't want to lock money for longer, maximum money is placed for 1 year and then rolled over. Correct? Now same logic you apply to the market. होता क्या है कि people underestimate their horizon when it comes to the market also. Actually, most people have money to spare for 5-10 years, unless and until in between they make a big asset purchase. Uske alawa, most people are earning every month. They are not living off their investments. So most of the time they are underestimating their time horizon, and that's why they are not able to. So ideally, when the market falls like this, either you should take benefit of it by investing more. If you are not prepared to do that, just do nothing. Stay put. Because if you react, that's when you're likely to make wrong decisions.
That's quite an interesting point that you said about the fixed deposits. Let's try and understand what our today's participants feel about the current scenario. Now they've heard what you've said, so maybe a few of the answers of what I'm going to ask next, they already know. So this is like a test where the answers have already been put out, but let's see what they really feel, So we're going to run a small question right now, which should be on your screens any moment. Looking at the current market and movement. Now we've heard Aashish, हमने आशीष को सुना है, and obviously we know a little bit of what we should be doing right now. But अगर आपको investment अभी करना है, what would your investment strategy be? क्या आप एक monthly SIP अभी शुरू करेंगे? Will you wait for the markets to fall before making a fresh investment? क्या आप markets के ऊपर जाने के लिए रुकेंगे? Will you wait for the market to go up before making an investment, or will you redeem all your money from your existing investments and just wait? What is it that you would do? Take a few seconds, think about this. Even if you're thinking about what Aashish just said and you have already understood what he said and now you're going to change your strategy, that's okay. We want to know what you're thinking, right? Because Aashish did explain it very nicely. A few of the answers already put out in what Aashish said, but let's hear आप क्या सोच रहे हैं अभी? आप इस मार्केट एनवायरनमेंट में आप कैसे इन्वेस्ट करेंगे? Will you start a monthly SIP now? Will you wait for the markets to fall? Right? मार्केट के लिए और शायद आपको लग रहा है यहाँ से मार्केट गिरेगा तो आप रुकना चाहेंगे, या आप उन इन्वेस्टर्स में से हो जिनको लग रहा है कि मार्केट यहाँ से अब बढ़ने वाला है, अब जितना गिरना था वो गिर गया. I don't know, maybe that's your view. और या आप अपना पूरा इन्वेस्टमेंट रिडीम करेंगे. Let's give maybe a few more seconds and let's see what everybody is thinking now. Aashish, what do you think? What do you think people will go for?
Yeah, I think, there's nothing, for example, we are having a discussion and we are prompting certain thoughts. As long as you get it right, that's good enough. It's not about me saying or you saying. Or
very good. That because your answer would have made someone change the answer. But anyway, okay, we seem to have quite a few people who have already answered. We'll just give a few seconds.
Meanwhile, I can tell you one example, Terence, that people who follow the news and who follow, जैसे आपको, I don't know if you noticed this, पिछले 10 साल में जो economics का Nobel Prize होता है ना, the Nobel Prize in economics in the last 10 years, at least twice, it has gone to people who study human behavior and not to people who traditionally study interest rates and exchange rates and the supply and demand. So, because hardcore economics assumes that human beings are logical and rational. And there is a very, very smart thinker who said human beings are not logical, they are psychological. So, and investing is all about psychology. It's all about being counterintuitive. Just when you are very, very scared, you should make yourself come about to invest. And just when you are very, very comfortable, And just when you think, kabhi-kabhi to lagta hai apunej bhagwan hai, that is not the time to invest. When you're high on confidence is not the time to invest. When you are slightly skeptical is a good time to invest.
Yep, absolutely right. In fact, a lot of the more successful investors, if I may say globally, they have been saying that, when the markets are completely fearful, that's when you should start thinking about doing something strong. And when everybody is overconfident, that's when you should start worrying. So that's quite an interesting point that you said. Okay, let's now see what the answers to the poll look like. Right, just okay. Wow, that's quite interesting, Ashish. I think what you have said, aapne abhi jo bataya, I think people have already accepted it, or they have resonated with what you said also. So 3% of the people, okay, 3% of our participants feel that they want to redeem the existing investments. So that's an interesting number, very small number, but yes, there are a few people who are thinking like that. 11% will wait for the markets to go up before making a fresh investment. So 11% will say, I'm going to wait, right, before I make my investment. 20% of the respondents are saying we will wait for the markets to fall, right? So they think that there possibly something more that's going to happen. Aapne jo bola, jo shayad imported problems hai, shayad kuch homegrown problems hai, whatever is driving that decision. 20% of the respondents, unko lag raha hai कि market के लिए गिरने के लिए रुकेंगे. But a 66%, and this is a very, very large majority, 66% of the participants think that they will start a monthly SIP now. So this is very, very interesting. Now, Ashish, given what we have just got an insight to, let me now come to the question, which everyone has been basically thinking about, right? As I said earlier, again, and you did answer part of this, but there are a lot of new investors, right, who I said, and the data is showing, who have been wondering, should I even start investing, right? While our participants here feel that they should go ahead with their SIPs, right? A lot of people some are aggressive, and they're saying maybe this is it, and I will start about going with my SIP. And I think SIP, and we've been talking about this, SIP is one of the best ways to do it, and we'd like to hear your views on that soon, right? So what do you think? And I'm going to ask two questions here, Ashish, if I may. What is your perspective on the market? Aapne kaha ki a lot of imported problems bhi hai, right? There are few homegrown problems, maybe not as much. At least jo aapne examples diye about the Ukraine-Russia war and everything else, right? That clearly is an imported problem, and there are many others, right? So my first question, Ashish, is what do you think? What's your perspective about the market in let's say the medium term, right? And as I said, based on what you just saw from what our investors said, what do you think should be the right investment strategy? Today's discussion is actually all about that. So over to you.
So, simply put, if you really ask me, since there was some mention about people starting SIPs, and since you also asked, is SIP the right thing to do? Or for example, what is the best strategy to go with? So, actually, these ups and downs which are happening, look, let us say, for example, some people started investing a year back, 2 years back. Okay. So let's say if you started investing in 2020 and you did an SIP. So from 2020 to 2021, NAVs were going up, right? So every month when you put an SIP, the next installment is going at a higher and higher NAV, right? After 2021 October, the market is falling down. So now two things are happening. One, some of the investments or some of the installments which went in 2021, there is a negative return. But assuming your SIP is continuing, all your new investments are happening at lower and lower NAV or lower and lower market value, correct? So now instead of looking at last year's installments or this year's installments, for a moment, if you look at this data, which I'm going to show you, what you will realize is that these ups and downs and this volatility is the best friend for people who are doing SIPs. See, what we have done here deliberately, we have put the current scenario, whatever is happening, we have put it in a chart or a graphical format. So let us say this is your scenario. The first part, NAV growth scenario 1. So 2020 में अगर आपने SIP start किया है, तो 2020 से लेके 2021 में this is what has been happening with you, right? Every month your SIP is going, NAV is going higher and higher. Now let us say 2022 में market has fallen. तो जब market falls and the NAV comes to this, let's say यहाँ पे 13 लिखा है I mean these are not actual NAVs, these are just some numbers which are bunged in to give examples, right? But let's say 10, 13, 16, 19 में आपका SIP गया and now the market has fallen and the value has gone down to 13. So it's obvious that पहले जो installments लगे हैं उनका भी value ये 13 के पास आ गया. लेकिन फिलहाल आपके जितने installments लग रहे हैं, they all are going at this particular range. Now, based on whatever data I have shown to you, ultimately क्या है, correction साल 6 महीना, 12 महीना, 18 महीना correction होता है. Eventually the market will recover. By the time the market recovers, a lot of your SIP installments would have gone at a lower level. So what it shows is, if the NAV keeps going up in a straight line, let us say you got 12% return. If the NAV falls once, take some of your installments at lower level, and then the market goes up, it enhances your return. And now you see the third chart. The first chart is no volatility. The second chart is one dip in the market and recovery. The third chart is basically ups and downs and a couple of more dips. So basically what it shows is that for people who are doing SIP, volatility actually increases your return. Because it's like this, कि एक ट्रेन अगर प्लेटफॉर्म से निकल गई है तो वो वापस नहीं आती है, राइट? बट अगर ट्रेन प्लेटफॉर्म से निकलने के बाद आपको लेने के लिए वापस आती है, तो दैट इज गुड न्यूज. व्हाट इज द हार्म विद दैट, राइट? So that's the whole point, that ultimately volatility is a friend for all the people who are doing SIPs. There's no, as long as you look through that period and as long as you don't get distracted by volatility, you just blindly continue your SIP. Volatility actually enhances your return because some installments will go at lower NAV. It will eventually bump up your overall return. That is the first thing which I would tell you. Now your second question really was, what is my view on the market, and what do I think, what is happening right now? So क्या है कि if you see today, I can say quite confidently that our market has been declining, not because of reasons related to our country, but it is actually reasons related to things which are happening outside the country. And I already showed you a chart which shows that India में किसी भी problem, India में जब market गिरता है, you remember the first chart I showed you, maybe I'll put it up again. Basically, it shows that whenever the market falls for whatever reasons which are outside of India, ultimately when the dust settles, the market really bounces back very, very sharply, right? So like all the times in the past, this time also, the market has fallen because of something which is happening in US or something which is happening in Russia. A lot of people will tell you, oh, because of that, the interest rate is going up. Because of Russia, the oil price is going up. Let me tell you one thing. In the long run, our market will reflect our domestic fundamentals. And in the long run, the US market will reflect US domestic fundamentals. Okay. So let's just look at one particular piece of information, why you should not get overly carried away. कि भाई US में क्या हो रहा है, India में क्या हो रहा है, हमारे market में क्या होगा. Yeah. So there are two parts in this slide actually. ऊपर का जो part है, उसमें क्या लिखा है कि 2000 से 2010 का जो दशक था, the decade of 2000 to 2010, what happened in the Indian index, what happened in the US index, and then 2010 to 2020, what happened in the US index, what happened in the Indian index. और नीचे जो है वो इंडेक्स नहीं है, वो कंपनियों का अर्निंग, कंपनियों का प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी का डेटा है. So now there are, let's start with this. 2010 to 2020, India, the companies in the Indian index, 2010 to 2020, all the companies listed in the Indian index, in those 10 years, the profit growth of Indian companies in dollar terms was -1%, meaning for 10 years, Indian companies, in rupee terms, their profit grew by 3-4% year on year. In dollar terms, their profit did not grow at all. In the same 10 years, for American companies, the profitability grew by 8% compounded year on year. Consequently, you just move up the chart. 2010 to 2020, India's index in dollar terms gave 0 return. And the US index in dollar terms gave 11% compounded return. So 2010 to 2020, let me sum up. Indian companies, their profit grew by 0, meaning the profits didn't grow. So 2010 to 2020, the index also in India didn't give return. 2010 to 2020, American companies' profit grew 8%. Their index compounded 11%. Okay. Now go to the previous decade, 2000 to 2010, completely the opposite. Indian companies' profitability grew by 14% compounded, and Indian index grew by 12% compounded. US companies' profitability grew only 2%, and their index did not give any return consequently. So what does this data tell you? कि short term में global financial crisis हुआ, 9/11 terror attack हुआ, tech bubble burst हो गया, ट्रम्प साहब इलेक्शन जीत गए, ट्रम्प साहब इलेक्शन हार गए. शॉर्टर टर्म में बहुत चीजें होती है, बट इफ यू टेक इवन अ 10 year as a time frame, ultimately what happened in these 10 years? Our company's profit grew, so our market grew. If our company's profit didn't grow, our market also didn't grow. तो शॉर्ट टर्म में बहुत सारी चीजें होती है. 2000 to 2010 का जो साल था ना, तो यूएस में जब टेक बबल बर्स्ट हुआ और यूएस में जब टेरर अटैक हुआ, तो उनका मार्केट गिरा, हमारा मार्केट भी गिरा. हम भी बिल्कुल भाईचारे में सिंपैथेटिकली वी आल्सो डिक्लाइंड विद देम. बट अल्टीमेटली व्हाट हैपेंड एट द एंड ऑफ 10 years? वो सब टेरर अटैक और टेक बबल सब पीछे रह गया. हमारे कंपनीज का जितना अर्निंग्स ग्रो हुआ, उतना ही हमारे मार्केट का अर्निंग ग्रो हुआ. 2010 टू 2020 में यूएस में बहुत बड़ी तेजी थी. उसका मतलब ये नहीं कि हमारा फायदा हुआ. आवर कंपनीज डिडंट परफॉर्म, तो हमारा ग्रोथ नहीं हुआ. सो व्हाट हैपेंस इज दैट राइट नाउ लॉट ऑफ पीपल आर वरीड कि अगर यूएस में इंटरेस्ट रेट बढ़ रहा है, यूएस में अगर मंदी है, तो हमारा क्या होगा. तो उनको मैं सीधा सवाल ये पूछूंगा कि भाई 2010 से 2020 में यूएस में बहुत तेजी थी, तो तुम्हारा क्या फायदा हुआ? नहीं हुआ फायदा, बिकॉज डोमेस्टिक कंडीशंस खराब थे. तो अब हमारे डोमेस्टिक कंडीशंस बहुत अच्छे हैं, तो वी शुड लुक एट 2000 टू 2010 एज एग्जांपल. वी शुड नॉट लुक एट लास्ट 10 years एज एग्जांपल, राइट? एंड व्हाई एम आई सेइंग कि अब हमारे यहाँ पे कंपनियों की हालत अच्छी है? लेट मी जस्ट वेरी क्विकली क्लोज दैट. द पॉइंट इज दैट इन इंडिया अगेन, जैसा मैंने 2000 टू 2010 दिखाया ना, वैसे ही इंडिया में फिर से कंपनियों का परफॉर्मेंस जो है वो एब्सोल्युटली इट इज इंप्रूविंग बाय लीप्स एंड बाउंड्स. See, this basically, not to get into too many technical graphs and charts, but this data actually I'll just point it out for you. See, यहाँ पे क्या दिखा रहा है 2020 के बाद से. You can clearly see what it is showing. After 2010, companies in India, their profit is growing at 16% compounded. After 2020, see, you can see these new skyscrapers being built where I'm putting the red dot.
Wow, that's very interesting.
2020, 21, 22, and we are right now in 2023 financial year. So see, last 10 years I showed you where I'm the red dot I'm putting. Last 10 years, profit growth was not there. 2000 to 2008, profit growth was very solid. Again, 2020 onwards, profit growth is very solid. So क्या है? The job of the short-term trends is to distract you from the long-term trend. बट अल्टीमेटली हमारे बाजार में उतना ही रिटर्न बनेगा जितना हमारी कंपनियों का मुनाफा बढ़ेगा. और 100 बात की एक बात क्या है कि 2000 से 2010 में यूएस में ऐसे ही क्राइसिस आते थे, लेकिन अल्टीमेटली हमारी कंपनियों का मुनाफा बढ़ा तो हमारा रिटर्न बना. 2020 के बाद यूएस में क्राइसिस है, लेकिन हमारी कंपनियों का प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी बढ़ रहा है. दैट इज अल्टीमेटली व्हाट मैटर्स टू अस, बिकॉज मनी चेजेस ग्रोथ एंड आवर कंट्री इज बैक टू ग्रोइंग. सो दैट इज व्हाट वी हैव टू फोकस ऑन.
That's very interesting, Ashish. I think this is जो for all our participants, ये जो आशीष ने अभी बताया है, it's very important. हम हमेशा भी, as Ashish said, imported problems, we get so worried about ये जो US में क्या हो रहा है, globally क्या हो रहा है. But as Ashish also just said, the key is how are Indian companies performing. And जो आपने अभी जो data देखा है, it very clearly shows that in the last few years, especially from 2020 on, the Indian companies are really doing well. So you know what is going to happen over the next few years if this trend continues. So thank you, Ashish. I think I'm sure a lot of participants have found these insights quite useful. Now, a last question before we move to the Q&A, because I can see a lot of people already posting questions, and we may just run out of time. There are a lot of youngsters also listening, and I'm sure आपको ये question बार-बार पूछा जाता है. Is there a secret formula, right, getting wealthy? Because a lot of people think that ये करूंगा 1 2 3 चीज and I'll get wealthy. Is there a secret formula? What's your view about this?
Secret formula for getting wealthy, in my experience, is to be very, very good at your job and to make a blockbuster out of your career. I think that is the most bankable See, it's like this. Look at, I mean, I don't mean to get philosophical here, right? When you buy equity, Terence, when you buy equity, you are betting on some entrepreneur, correct? If you buy Reliance Industries, ultimately you're betting on Mr. Ambani and the management of Reliance Industries. So ultimately, when you buy equity, you are becoming a shareholder, meaning you are becoming a partner with some entrepreneur, businessman, or equity owner, correct? So the point is that if you really think that betting on someone is going to be your secret success formula, then yes, maybe yes, it will eventually work. But I think the best is to bet on yourself and really excel at your career. So one is that obviously the secret formula is do very well in your career, never lose sight of that. But I'm not here to preach or to be philosophical. Now coming to the second best, let me put it that way. What is the second best secret of success? The second best secret of success is obviously that apart from you, you bet on other people and their businesses and their entrepreneurial talent and their business acumen. So obviously that has to be investing in equity. But investing in equity, what happens is a lot of people think that the way to make money in equity is to find multi-baggers. And unfortunately, a lot of equity communication in our country is about storytelling or about folklore. कि 1980 में 10,000 का विप्रो लेते हैं तो अभी 600 करोड़ हो जाता. XYZ इन्वेस्टर ने 2000 के साल में ये स्टॉक लिया तो उसका 2020 के साल में 200 करोड़ हो गया. See, those are all चमत्कार. Okay. I don't think that the secret formula for success is to believe in chamatkar. And when somebody tells you that 10,000 ka Wipro can become 600 crore, the missing link is that it is after 42 years. Okay. So the secret success is keep investing in equity, and if not 40 years, keep at it for 10, 15 years. Right. Yeah, I think that is the thing. It's not sounding, I know what I'm saying is not sounding cool, but unfortunately that is the reality.
Yeah, but I think you're absolutely true. It doesn't sound cool, but as you said, if someone stays, agar aap investments mein agar aap 10-15 saal, the longer that you stay, when it really happens, you will feel cool because that's the amount that it will grow to. So thank you, Aashish. Let's now move to the Q&A because we have a lot of questions. We are already running out of time. Let's try and go to the few questions that we can. We've tried and picked up a few questions because there were a lot of questions which are also repetitive. But the first question is, considering the current market volatility, are mutual funds advised for new customers? Should new customers invest in mutual funds given the current market volatility? Ye hai pehla question.
See, I think that, mutual funds managers, it's a professional service. So question is whether you want to manage yourself or you want to give it to a professional. That's the thing. Okay. And what I've seen is that a lot of people who started in 2020 by buying stocks, in the first 1 year, they became very successful. So they would have started, it's but natural that if I do something and I turn out to be very, very successful, I will attribute it to my individual brilliance. But basically what happened is that from 2020 to 2021, suddenly in a short span, the market doubled. And after 2021, now is when the scenario is turning out to be very, very challenging and it's difficult to maintain the same conviction. So I would say that, if you want to learn and if you want to dabble into direct investing to gain experience and to see how it works, that's fine. Maybe always you can have some play money on the side. But I don't think that you can have your entire corpus being managed by you personally because, your own investment will be subject to emotions. And, I don't know how much time and capability or competency people would have to research everything on their own and to track, all this data and presentation and all these interpretations and perspectives we are sharing for one individual to sit in a corner and gather all of this thought process. It's not like I am also making all this on my own. Behind me, there is a 32 people investment team, right? So whether it's not about me or my company or any specific company, the point is that at any point in time, when you're a youngster, when you're starting out new, it's better that you give your money, to a professional manager. The least that they should do is to beat the benchmark, right? If you do it individually, maybe 1 or 2 stocks you may make money, maybe a couple of stocks you may lose money. How much to allocate to which stock? What to do when the stock price falls? Should you add more or should you get out? So I think managing money, it was made to look very easy in 2020, 2021. But let me tell you, it's not that easy. There are a lot of people who entered the market in 2017, 18 And by 2019-20, they thought this place is not for me. There are a lot of people who entered in 2020 and they would have thought, what is this song and dance about? It's so easy. The reality is that it's not as difficult as it appears to the guy who came in 2017. And it's not as easy as it appears to the guy who came in 2020. So I think it has to be a professional job. Who you entrust your money with is your choice, but ideal to give it to a professional. Mutual funds are service providers, maybe make best use of it.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because a lot of us often we only look at the one or two good examples that we have where we made money. In fact, I talk to a lot of investors, and a lot of times you walk into a party and you find someone talking over this, oh, one stock that I bought and it went 10 times. They never tell you what happened to the stocks that actually where they lost money. So that's quite true. I mean, it's very important. If you have the time, agar aapke paas waqt hai, if you are able to really understand this, research, maybe then you could look at it. But if not, as Ashish earlier said, the secret is actually concentrating on your career and let some of the professionals, as Ashish said, for example, unke team mein 32 people are managing this. Can you imagine the amount of time? 32 people doing only this 7 days a week. So that's a lot of time. So we'll move on to a second question now. This is a little related. Now here's the question. It says, I am a new joiner. I've just started investing. I want to know which option to choose. Right? So क्या मैं stocks या funds में invest करूँ, which is what you just answered. But I've just read it because I want to go to the second part of this question. What is my strategy in the long term? Will it change after 10 years? अगर मैं अब stocks on my own कर रहा हूँ या mutual funds के द्वारा कर रहा हूँ, क्या 10 साल बाद मेरी strategy change होनी चाहिए? What should I do after 10 years?
See, I think if you think that you are becoming, if you spend a lot of time in reading, in learning, if you think you are becoming better at doing it, then some part of your portfolio you can experiment by starting to manage yourself or doing few things. But I think nothing needs to really change. I mean, ultimately what happens is if you keep investing regularly, after 5-10 years is when your corpus will really start to grow. And what happens is that when you have invested in an SIP for say 10,000 rupees, you invest for 12 months, it's 1,20,000. So at the end of year one, your investment is growing on top of that 1.2 lakhs. At the end of 5 years, it is 6 lakhs plus some growth, right? But by the time you cross 10 years, 12 years, the corpus starts becoming bigger because that's how compounding plays. You get whatever return you are getting, you will get that return on a higher and higher corpus. So I don't think anything needs to change. Yes, if you just think that, okay, now I can do it myself, then maybe take some corpus and dabble on it on your own. But otherwise, I think that nothing needs to change. Just stay the course. In fact, after 5-10 years is when you will really start seeing the results of what you did in the previous few years.
Okay, so that's thanks a lot. Now the next question is very interesting. I've heard this so many times in the last few weeks, and I'm sure you have, and this is on everyone's mind, but I just thought we'll start with one or two easy questions. There's a lot of news, and this is the question, and I'm reading it exactly as it's typed. There's a lot of news running about recession. Recession is on the cards. Is there any chance of recession? How should I think about it? This question, in fact, has been typed many times, so I'm just summarizing the many times this question has been posed right now.
I'll tell you on a lighter note, all the newspapers and the television that we watch, I sincerely feel that on top, whenever they discuss recession and interest rates, on the top they should say that, dear viewers, we are discussing USA and you are sitting in India. Okay, I think if they put that disclaimer, people will feel more, people will be able to relate to it. Jaisa maine pehle bhi aapko bataya, even before this question came, everybody was thinking कि भाई recession, we are not in US, we are sitting in India. Okay, and a slowdown or a recession in US doesn't necessarily mean that there should be a slowdown or recession in India. And I think this question was probably put up earlier, but in between terrains we discussed that how India's stock market tracks India's corporate performance and how US stock market tracks US corporate performance. So answer is clear, no, there is no reason to believe that there is going to be a recession in India. Is there a recession likely in US? I'm not, it's above my pay grade. I'm not an expert to comment on it. But the point is that, look at it this way. Before COVID, 10 years, the US was booming. For those who don't track this, the size of US GDP, their annual output is $21 trillion.
Wow.
On that $21 trillion before COVID, in the year 2019, the US grew at 3.5%. Just for sense of scale, our economy was 2.5 trillion and we grew 3.7%. So normally, if it's a 1-ton truck and it is riding at 100 kilometers per hour, it is believable. But if it is a 40-ton trailer truck and that is going at 100 kilometers per hour, you will realize what momentum I'm actually talking about.
Yep.
And when COVID happened, their truck met with an accident on the highway. When COVID happened, we had one tiny truck which was in the parking lot and it was barely even moving, right? So please understand that before COVID, for 10 years, the US was booming. When COVID happened, they literally sent extra paychecks to people's accounts and, pumped up the demand, thinking that, oh my God, we are going to slow down. So they pumped up the demand. So they literally doled out money to people. The demand went berserk. On top of it, because of COVID in China, the supply chains got restricted. Stuff was not available. House prices started to shoot up. On top of it, there is a war in Europe and oil, commodity and metal prices went up. So in US, whatever could have happened, whatever could have gone wrong to bump up inflation, everything happened. In India, before COVID, we were in a ghor mandi. Our GDP growth was 3.5%. Our inflation was only 2%, right? So before COVID, we were in a mandi. जब तेजी है ही नहीं तो मंदी कैसे आ सकती है? हम तो after COVID, we have just about started to recover. And we had some inflation because of fuel prices and food prices, all of which have started to decline now. And the last thing I'll tell you, never compare US inflation with India's inflation. In India, the government's official tolerance range is 6%. We have 7 to 8% inflation. In US, the official tolerance range is 1 to 2%. On top of it, they have 9% inflation. So 9% inflation in US means very different things because they import everything. And 7% inflation in India means very different things. In India, 5 to 6% inflation means that there is a wage growth, there is a rise in employment, there is higher nominal growth, there is higher tax collection. It's very American thinking to think that all inflation is bad inflation. It's not true. America's rules don't apply to India. In my 24 years in India, tracking the markets, I have seen 9% growth with 9% inflation. I have seen 4% GDP growth with 2% inflation. Both were bad for us. The best years in India were when we had 8% GDP growth with 5 to 6% inflation. So it's very American thinking to say that India should also have 1 or 2% inflation. It doesn't apply to us at all. And a US slowdown doesn't mean there will be slowdown in India. In fact, all the charts I showed to you about the last 2 decades comparing India and US, they seem to suggest that ultimately, if the US and China are slowing down, India will attract more investment in reality.
Absolutely. And I like the point about the Indian truck coming onto the highway. I think we're going to really move at a very fast pace. Okay, so I know we've run out of time, but there are so many questions. I just want to ask one last question before we move, and this is very interesting. So the question is, we know that equity mutual funds are managed by expert fund managers, and I think this applies to funds in general. How does their expertise help investors during the volatile markets, in the volatile markets? So I think this is one of the last questions.
2, 3 things. Yeah, very good question. Terence, look, 2 things. Number 1, equity is by nature volatile. So just because market is volatile and there are sometimes ups and downs, first of all, I already explained that how volatility is a friend for people who are doing SIPs, number 1. Number 2, volatility is a feature, not a bug. Okay. So just because there is volatility and NAVs are yo-yoing up and down, doesn't mean there is anything particularly wrong with any one fund manager. Yes, there are funds with good performance, not so good performance. There are fund managers who have great track records who for a couple of years start doing badly. All that is part and parcel because every fund manager approaches the market with a particular recipe or a particular formula, right? And markets by nature are cyclical. So formulas and recipes go in and out of favor. That can happen. But just because there is volatility doesn't mean that a fund manager or a fund has gone bad. There will always be good and bad patches even for the best of funds. So the key point is that volatility is part and parcel of the market. You can't run away from it. What you need to do actually is only put that money into equity on which you don't lose sleep if 10 rupees becomes 8 or 9 rupees. So put your, whatever money you can spare for long and whatever money you can tolerate 10-20% depreciation happily, only put that into equity. The money which you want at your beck and call, the money on which you cannot tolerate any volatility, that money you put into short-term debt funds or fixed deposits or bond funds or whatever it is. That is one. Second is, if you want to put in equity, but you cannot tolerate so much volatility, then you go for a hybrid fund or a balanced advantage fund or whatever other options are available. So volatility has nothing to do with expertise of fund managers. It's a question of how your asset allocation is cast. If you are not doing your asset allocation, can you go into a hybrid fund or a balanced advantage fund? That you can decide, right? But if you are invested into 100% equity, then volatility is part and parcel of the life. If you are in a 100% equity fund, the only thing that a fund manager can do is he can outperform the market. So if market goes up, he should go up more than the market. If market falls, he should fall less than the market. That you can definitely judge a fund manager for. But otherwise, volatility is a feature and it's only going to help the SIP investors. If you can't tolerate volatility, please review your asset allocation or go for a hybrid or balanced advantage fund.
Yep, I think this is what we always say to most of our investors also. So you really have to, if you are investing in equity, it has to be for the long term. Don't try and time it in the short term. That's something it's very important. And I think your point on the investment management and the expert managers, to answer the question, right? What you have to look at is how, as Aashish said, when the markets are going up, is your fund doing better? And when the markets are going low, is your fund going lower lesser, right? So it's not like when the markets are going down, your fund is going to make a profit. That's going to be a very, very rare scenario. So anyway, that brings us to the end of this session. We're just going to run a poll to understand our users, how our participants, how they appreciated this session, which will come up on their screens now. And let me take that time, Aashish, to thank you very much. I think very insightful. Liked a few examples of yours, especially the imported problem term that you use, and the whole how our Indian truck has just come out of the parking lot, and we are seeing that in the last few years. So I think it's going to be a very, very interesting time. A lot of users already believe that SIP is one of the best ways. So that's quite interesting that the users do understand the importance of this. So again, thanks a lot, Aashish, for taking out time. I know you have a busy schedule. Really appreciate that. And thanks a lot to all our participants. I hope you found this session insightful, and we look forward to talking to you sometime soon. Bye-bye and have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.